So we talked about the fact that one of the reasons that we're here in Dublin is for the lessons that we can learn from the way that, when I was growing up, the fact that there would ever be an end to the conflict in Northern Ireland seemed completely impossible. And we had a great session yesterday and a great start to that before you went to your breakout sessions. And then was a fantastic breakout session, and I was chatting with Daniel from Colombia, who was raving about what happened yesterday afternoon. And you're now going to get a report back from the delegates who went to Croke Park and the councillors and guests who went with them. So to introduce everyone, please welcome back Bob Coggins.
Up there. Okay, so just to fill in, because they're just getting ready. So just so we know what's happened. I don't know how many of you got this from the VT yesterday, but Croke Park, one of the great rugby stadiums here in Dublin, was the site many years ago of where British soldiers shot and killed some Irish people. So a big wound in Ireland's heart and in the heart of Dublin. And over the last few years, as they've come to peace and conflict resolution in the north, Croke Park has become a venue, a symbol of reconciliation and the fact that these warring peoples are talking to each other and building a future together. So you saw yesterday two people who were paramilitaries in the war and the struggle, Sean and Jackie. And they've really, A, they were enemies for a long time. B, they're now the greatest of friends. And C, they agreed at the urging of Senator Martin McAleese to come together here in Dublin specifically for your session yesterday, but also to go back to Croke Park with delegates from conflict regions of the world. And you've seen over the last 2 days how bad some of the conflict really is. To go with Sean and Jackie to Croke Park to work with One Young World delegates to try to share these impressions, because as David said, certainly when I was growing up, it was probably before David was even born, but certainly when we were younger, it did really seem that any kind of resolution to the Northern Ireland conflict was absolutely impossible.
And many people would not have believed it possible that those guys would have sat on a stage together ever. So on that note, we will bring in Bob, who we now have. So Bob, please come on and introduce the session. Big round of applause for Bob.
Bob Coggins.
Bob Coggins.
How are we? Hello, mate. Cheers.
Good morning. I thought I'd be talking to about 2 people this morning when I seen everyone in the storehouse last night. You all had a good night last night? Okay, so we had a really good day yesterday after the initial peace and conflict session here. A group of 29 delegates went to Croke Park, our iconic National GAA stadium, to listen to, question and debate the panel from yesterday's session. We opened with a very honest personal account from Jackie and Sean. They recounted why they took up arms and what the personal cost of that decision was. We heard from Martin McAleese what was created through the Good Friday Agreement and how the work of that agreement is yet to be completed. The legacies and traditions to take a lot more work and time to reach consensus on. Meghan O'Sullivan brought us through the individual challenges of dealing with those legacy issues and many reasons why the latest talks on flags and parades and their emblematic traditions are so important as part of that complete process of peace. What happened there was seismic. Delegates got to discuss in detail the perceived barriers to peace in their regions, and the challenge, the lessons learned from the peacemakers in the north, in Northern Ireland. So this morning, we're going to hear from those delegates in discussion with Meghan O'Sullivan. They have so much to achieve, and they have the ambition to match that challenge. We'll hear what they've learned and what they're going to do with it. We'll then get a reflection from Jackie, Sean, and Martin, and a final reflection on the importance of the lessons of conflict resolution from Martin McAleese. That just sets the order. So I'd like to introduce our guests, Meghan O'Sullivan, Martin McAleese, Sean Murray and Jackie McDonald. Yeah. But we really want to put your hands together for the Peace and Conflict Resolution delegates themselves. Please welcome them on the stage. We'll probably have to keep that applause going. Here we go. Do something with Sean and Jackie. Do you want Meghan to do Sean?
Good morning, everyone. As Bob mentioned, we had a fabulous breakout session yesterday where we heard from Jackie and from Sean about the very long and hard road from violent conflict to peace. But many of these young people are from conflicts that are deep in the midst of violence today. And even as we speak, and as we're here in Dublin today, a lot of horrible things are happening around the world. How can they take the experiences of Jackie and Sean from Northern Ireland and apply them to very active conflicts today? And that's what we're going to do. And they've joined us all, and I'm going to give them an opportunity to speak and basically ask them what inspiration did they get from hearing about Northern Ireland's journey from conflict to peace? How is it applicable to their country and the challenges that they face? And what action do they leave Dublin with to go home and make a difference in their own society? And I'd like to begin first with Deborah from South Sudan.
Thank you. Thank you.
There you go. Give it a shot.
Thank you. We are all aware that there's conflict across the world. And this conflict we are all aware that there are conflicts across the world, in Africa, in Europe, in the Middle East, and other parts of the world. Some of these conflicts have turned so violent that it has claimed so many lives of people. Some parties to this conflict have used sophisticated weapons to kill innocent people in the name of solving a conflict. Having attended a session yesterday on peace and conflict resolution in Northern Ireland, we have learned that violence is no longer a solution to the conflict, but rather engage in a dialogue. We also know that there are usually two parties to the conflict. And listening yesterday to Ms. Mega, she has told us that these parties to the conflict should not allow the third party to influence their ideas into solving the conflict. They should always take dialogue as their responsibility. They should have an obligation towards solving the problem. Therefore, we have to treat conflict as our responsibility and a compromise. A compromise in the sense that we have to listen to the other party, and we have to talk to the other party and reach a point where we meet. Dialogue is not just about talking. It is about listening to the other party and understand their point of view. Having said this, in South Sudan, there are conflicts. But then, when I go back to South Sudan, I will tell the people of South Sudan, especially the leadership, that we need to indulge in dialogue. And then at the end of the day, we should commit to the agreements we have signed during the dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Next, we'll hear from Hakeem, who is from Kashmir, from the Indian side of Kashmir.
Thank you. First of all, it's an honor to be a part of One Young World Summit, and particularly for a person like me from Kashmir who has not been given a platform at the international level to speak. And I'm honored to be, to listen to the dignitaries sitting over here who have been a part of Ireland conflict. The only thing I can say is that I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot, and I have taken a lot, which I'm going to share with my friends back home there in Kashmir. And the first thing is trust. Peace and conflict is something like conflict, you have processes. It's not like just in one go you will have peace. You need processes for it. You need dialogues. You need to have trust, the trust deficit, because in Kashmir you have this thing of trust deficit. So I believe that what the lessons I've learned in this last night we had is that you need to have trust. You need to have trust among yourself. You need to have a trust within, with the enemy as well. You need to see the humane side of it. You need to see that, you cannot use force to end conflict. You cannot use the military invasion to end conflict. You need to have trust. You need to work on and find some ways. How long it takes, I mean, it may take 6 days, 6 years, or 600 years, but you need to sustain with it. And inshallah, Kashmir will sustain for peace, for freedom, and for justice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well said, Hakeem. Well said. Say quickly.
I would say, inshallah, as you said, certainly. And now we're going to hear from Sanja from Montenegro.
Thank you. So, as a key learning from the Peace and Reconciliation Breakout Session, I would also take trust, as Hakeem mentioned, when it comes to conflict resolution. Namely, I was very much pleased to learn and to see with my own eyes how two people who used to be enemies, Mr. Murray and Mr. McDonald, not only achieved peace and conflict resolution for their communities, but the two of them also became friends. And it was at that point when the idea of achieving peace in a conflicting region became plastically real for me in a desirable version of peace. Because, as we learned in the session, peace is not only the absence of fight, but it is also living in a relaxed and friendly atmosphere. And so the question that followed in my mind was, what made the Balkan region, where I come from, different so that we haven't seen such a positive conflict resolution? And the first answer, in my opinion, is the existence of trust, as while in the Northern Ireland, we could see people believed to their leaders, and leaders believed each other when stepping plan for resolution. And also they believed to the international community and third-party mediators. All of this was lacking in Balkan. People did not trust to their leaders. And when you imagine a lot of diverse communities living in such a small region, tightly connected, when the conflict appeared, they didn't trust each other. And finally, this has reflected to not trusting the international community. I think this is particularly true for Serbian and Montenegrin nationality, as they have felt that international media took a non-favorable stance towards them. And so these were all the differences in Balkan compared to Northern Ireland, which made the conflict resolution different.
Thank you. Now we'll hear from Nushel, who is from Sri Lanka.
So yesterday, during our breakout during our breakout conversation, Jackie McDonald said, "I am still a loyalist, and I will be until the day I die." Sean Murray said, during the conflict, if the occasion had arisen, we would have killed each other. And those confessions from both of you were incredibly powerful to me. It gave me a kind of hope, because I realized for the first time very clearly that peace doesn't only start with people who've only been advocating for peace all their lives. It starts with people who've been on the front lines, who've used their hatred to kill other people, and who we sometimes deem terrorists. You know, when we have peace conversations, it tends to be moderates from one side talking to moderates from another side. And we often discount the views of people who we think their views are so extreme that they can't contribute to productive conversation. But I look at them today and I'm like, look at them, they're my heroes. I mean, look at them in conversation. Here are two people who are struggling, who continue to struggle to reconcile what they want Ireland to be and the future they want to see, and the future they want their children to see. Here are two people who can strongly perpetuate the stereotypes we have of our enemies, but they are also the people who can most powerfully break down those barriers. But of course, it takes time. It takes a lifetime. And so for me, the lesson is one of inclusion. Not just people from both sides, because we often include people with moderate views from both sides, but people whose views seem irreconcilable, people whose views we don't think can contribute to making a change. I think our point of entry, our point of commonality, doesn't need to be a similar viewpoint. They clearly didn't start with that. Instead, it seems to be that they're willing to say, look, I have a view. It's very strong. I know it doesn't tally with yours. I know it doesn't mesh with yours at all, but I am willing to try a different way to get there, and I am willing to accept the transformation that comes along with it.
Very well said.
Thank you for that, Michelle. Now we'll hear from Aldonia from Albania.
Hello, everybody. First of all, let me tell you that the summit has been an extremely inspiration until now. Secondly, I would like to point out that this is the right place and right time for me to be today. And I will go back to it after some minutes, but first, let me explain you what happened yesterday. So we got like nearly 30 participants together from different corners on the world, and we talked on the Northern Ireland Irish conflict. And then we were divided into groups. Each group had a mentor, and we had to give our feedback. How could we implement what was discussed there into our home countries? And something interesting happened during that discussion with my group. Like Sanya, who is here, she's from Montenegro, and she told me that during her 24 years of life, I was the first Albanian friend she had ever had. And let me tell you that Albanian, yeah, thank you. Let me tell you that Albania is in the Western Balkans, Southeast Europe, and Montenegro is a neighborhood country. But I told you before that this is the right place and right time for me to be. Let me remind you that 4 days ago, on the 14th of October, we had a match between Albania and Serbia in Belgrade. And what happened there was very, very sad. I don't know if any of you had read or heard something on the internet, but our footballers were violated from the Serbian fans, and it was very, very sad. Like in the Balkans, the relation between countries are very tense, and this was something that hurt everybody. But the question now is, how can we move the peace and reconciliation process forward? What can we do? And I think the answer to that is communication and education between young people. And this is a call for, thank you. This is a call for all of you, but especially for young people in the Balkans. Guys, let's get together. Let's implement social projects between our Balkan countries, because it's difficult for us, countries who have experienced conflicts, to get to know each other. So I believe we can achieve peace through youth activism. So let us build a better world, a one young world. Let us be the change. That's my call for today. Thank you.
Brilliant. Well said. Brilliant.
Thank you. Now we'll hear from Noam, who described herself as being from outside of Jerusalem.
When our societies become most violent, most brutal, most hopeless, when the situation is as extreme as it gets, this is where we step in. You yesterday taught us maybe the most important message the Northern Ireland process can teach us, that no future solution in any conflict context will ever be sustainable or viable or truthful if the people who lead the armed struggle, if the people who are the potential spoilers of the nonviolent agreements don't take down their arms and find a way, a sensitive way, to engage themselves in the process. As I was listening to you, I was jealous. I was jealous because I want role models in my society like you, who are taking risks and are willing to put their necks on the line. I am here because we refuse to accept the reality the way it is. We refuse to accept destructive policies as they are. We want to demand from our leadership to provide us with strategic solutions for our future. The well-being of the Palestinians is the well-being of the Israelis, is the well-being of the Palestinians, is the well-being of the Israelis.
Thank you. And now we'll hear from Regis from Colombia with his friend, Daniel.
Thank you. My name is Regis Ortiz. I am from Colombia y no aprendí a hablar inglés porque pensé que nunca iba a salir de mi país, pero hoy estoy aquí frente a ustedes, jóvenes del mundo.
My name is Daniel Burichica. I'm from Colombia too. I will be translating to my friend Regis. As he just said, he did not learn to speak English because he never thought to be here. My aunt was kidnapped by the FARC, the main guerrilla army group in the country. And Regis is an ex-soldier from that guerrilla.
Quisiera contarles un poco de mi historia.
I would like to tell you a little bit of my story.
Yo era líder estudiantil.
I was a student leader,
y fui amenazado
and I was threatened
por grupos paramilitares.
by paramilitary groups in my country.
Y tomé la decisión de refugiarme
I took the decision to hide myself
en la guerrilla de la FARC.
in the FARC guerrilla.
Ahí duré 2 años.
I was there for 2 years.
Donde experimenté lo cruel que es la guerra.
And I had to live a cruelty war, how cruel the conflict is.
Caminábamos durante mucho tiempo.
We walked for long distances.
Nos bombardeaban.
There was air bombing.
Habían combates.
A lot of combats.
En esos 2 años conocí a un niño
in those 2 years,
de 12 años llamado Cruz Roja.
In those 2 years I met a kid that his name was
Él
Red,
era un niño que tenía un sueño.
and he had a dream.
Quería ser futbolista,
He wanted to be a soccer player,
pero también quería ser guerrillero.
but he also wanted to be a guerrilla soldier.
Y quería ser guerrillero porque era la única opción que había visto durante toda su vida.
And he wanted to be a guerrilla soldier because it was the only thing he ever saw.
Yo le dije que no,
I
que
told
se
him
fuera
no.
para su casa
Go to your home
a jugar fútbol.
to play soccer.
Tiempo después lo encontré en las filas de la FARC.
Sometime later, I found him in another military unit of the guerrilla.
Un 27 de octubre
27 of October
del 2007
2007,
nos bombardean el campamento.
there's an air bombing,
Este niño muere en mis brazos
and Red, this kid, he died in my arms.
diciéndome que estaba arrepentido por la decisión que había tomado.
In his agony, he just said that he regret his decision.
Y fue ahí, en ese preciso
I
momento,
was there in
en
that
donde
moment
decidí
in which I decided
abandonar la guerrilla
to escape
y trabajar
and work
por la construcción de un nuevo país
to build
sin violencia.
a new country without violence.
Hoy,
Today,
trabajo
I work
para que esas personas
so people like me
deciden salirse de la
that
guerra
decide to escape from
puedan
war
reintegrarse
can come back to civil society.
a la sociedad. Pero también
But also,
trabajo
I work
para que la sociedad
for
colombiana
society, for Colombian society,
aprenda a reconciliarse.
learn to reconcile
Hoy
ourselves.
les
Today,
agradezco
I thank you
a ustedes porque me han dado una gran lección.
because you gave me a huge lesson.
Hoy voy con más fuerza a mi
I
país
come back with more energy to my country
a decirles que es posible
to tell
reconciliarse
them that it is possible to
podemos
reconcile
reconciliarnos.
ourselves, that we can reconcile ourselves,
y que la violencia
and that violence
no puede ser una opción
cannot be an
en
option
ningún contexto.
in any context.
Bajo ninguna circunstancia la
Under any
violencia puede ser una
circumstances, the
opción.
violence could be an option.
Yo quisiera pedirles al auditorio
I would like to ask you all
un minuto de silencio
a moment of silence
por el niño Cruz Roja
in the memory of Red
y por todos
and
esos
all the
niños y
children
niñas y jóvenes
and young
del
people
mundo
from the world
que han muerto
that died
por causa del conflicto.
because of the conflict. Please stand up for 1 minute. Give us a moment of silence in the memory of Red and all the children that died in conflicts. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Regis and Daniel. Now we'll hear from Tafan, who is from Kurdistan.
One thing that stuck with me a lot after yesterday's session with you, Meghan, was you were talking about identity issues and issues in the past of a country. I've been struggling for years during my childhood with what I can identify myself with. Being Kurd, I know one thing and another about being oppressed and not being denied my identity and who I am. And fleeing Kurdistan as a political refugee with my mom didn't make the situation a lot easier either. Despite growing up in a country like Sweden, that I know many of us know has so strong democratic values, I was still being fed so much hate and dispute to the countries that borders to Kurdistan today. And I was a child, so I didn't know better. That was what I was being taught by the surroundings, by friends and others. So during my childhood, a lot of years, I carried this resentment towards these people from these countries without knowing why. Until I was 11, that was when I could go back to Kurdistan for the first time after the war with the Saddam regime. Back then, we didn't have airports in Kurdistan. It's a lot different now, much more developed, luckily. We didn't have airports, so you had to fly to Turkey or Syria and later on drive into Kurdistan. And I remember me and my dad did that once when I was 11, and I saw these kids in the street while we were in Syria. poverty. I saw kids begging for money, kids in my age that was working, things they shouldn't be doing. Now, I didn't know that that was Syria. I didn't ask. I was just in the car with my dad. One thing I knew was that was not humane. So what happened was these kind of things shaped me into what I am right now and who I am today. I work at the refugee camps a lot in Kurdistan, helping the displaced families who has been running and fleeing from ISIS. It's heartbreaking for me to see these children, how they are being so affected of wars they do not know of and not started, and are the biggest victims of our leaders' decisions. These kids will have it a lot harder than what I had. They will grow up, because they share a different religion from what others do, they will grow up hating every single Muslim they see, because that's what they're going to be fed by parents and others in their surrounding, knowing that ISIS were the reason they fled, and ISIS do not represent Islam. So I just want to say the biggest weapon to defeat fragmentation is love. These kids will be mixed with orphanages from kids who share different backgrounds and share different religions when I get back. And I will collaborate with these orphanages to make sure they'll be mixed. Kids do not know of hate. They do not know what it is. They should never know what it is. All they should know is how to defeat this hate, and that's with love.
Thank you, Tafan. Now we'll hear from Kardo, who is also from Kurdistan.
Okay, good morning. Thank you so much for being here. Just a background to what's happening there in the region and in my country. The region all and Kurdistan are subjected to a campaign led by, to a military and savage campaign led by a systematic non-humanitarian group of terrorists called ISIS, I think you know. And they are practicing massive murder, they are raping, they try to impose their own religious beliefs on others by force. And the thing is, only Kurdistan, only my country is fighting them. And the youth of Kurdistan, are sacrificing themselves for their country and for the sake of humanity, because simply ISIS and terrorism are global issues. They are global issues. They are not something internal. That's why from here I ask all the countries, NGOs, UN, the entire world to help and support Kurdistan Army, the Peshmerga, the brave Peshmerga in their fight against ISIS, for the sake of humanity, not any other thing. We as young leaders, this is what I want to say. We as civil young leaders, what did we learn from yesterday and what should we have to do? I think because we believe that these wars cannot be ended by another war. And we believe that the real war is against an ideology, not just military. So we have to aware and educate the young people in the community. We have to educate them about humanity. We have to tell them that human is the essence, not race, not color, not religion, not language, not any other thing. They are just superficials. The essence is that we all are human. And it's important to teach them and to try hard to make them, to uproot the concept of violence and extremism and radicality in them by advocating for an educated, a civil, an enlightened, a tolerant ideology and religion. And thus we can create a generation that can lead for a better, for a peaceful, for a tolerant life. Thank you.
That's it. You nailed it. Well done.
Now we're going to hear from Amanda from Northern Ireland and also Anthony from Northern Ireland.
Hello. Yesterday, myself and Anthony took part in the Peace and Reconciliation External Breakout after the session on conflict in Northern Ireland. We became inspired by Jackie McDonald and Sean Murray's stories about their involvement in paramilitary organisations and how they managed to resolve their conflicts. This motivated us into wanting to do a cross-community programme within our own separate communities, with a session based on Jackie and Sean's journey, so the young people can learn more about their community's history. We are hoping to create a 6 weeks programme discussing the young people's views and values concerning their communities and its history. We will then introduce Jackie and Sean in the last session to give inspiration on how peace was achieved. Our aim is to have young people to come away from the programme with a different view than they may have had before. We hope that they then pass their newfound knowledge to their peers and hope to achieve a change in perception.
Thank you, Amanda. Growing up in a Republican area of Ardown in North Belfast, it was always hard for me not to try and fall into a sectarian divide. I'm glad to say that I didn't. I believe the main reason is because of education and my involvement in cross-community projects. Over the past number of days, and a couple of the colleagues in this stage already have touched on it, but in the past number of days we've talked about how education is a major factor in leadership and government, ensuring employability and basic human rights. And again, this came up today and in yesterday's discussion. Sectarianism, like racism and homophobia, among other things, is taught. You're not born with it. It's like a seed inside us, and they're fed and watered through the household or peers that it can spread up and choke a person. Tackling sectarianism at a young age is crucial for us in Ireland to move forward. For example, I cannot walk 5 minutes up my street before being in an interface and being met with loyalist flags directly causing tension. Cross-community programmes give this opportunity to end sectarianism in Ireland. Listening to Sean and Jackie yesterday talk about their involvement in the conflict and their transition to peace was a really inspiration for me. Knowing that they were the people who fought in the war and they were the people to negotiate the change in their respective areas begs the question, why can't we, as young people, do the same? So when I met Amanda, bear in mind, it was only 24 hours ago, less than 24 hours ago, I wanted to seize the opportunity with both hands to make an example. I soon learned that she is a young, intelligent woman with strong links in her community, the perfect traits needed. So when I proposed the idea of our programme, she was all over it. It's easy for anyone to talk about doing a plan of action. Anyone can go to Dublin and agree to promote anti-hatred. That's the easy part. It's what happens in the follow-up that matters. This world needs doers, not talkers, to create real change. And that's what myself and Amanda are, doers. Thank you.
Thank you. You can see what an excellent group we had and how inspiring they are. I have the privilege of having a few minutes to ask some questions. And there were a lot of themes that came out of our conversation yesterday. So I'd actually like to ask a couple of questions about those themes. The first one I'll direct to Pizvak, who's from Kashmir, from the Pakistani side. And many people talked yesterday about the need to look at people as humans, not as caricatures and not as embodiments of their sectarian, ethnic, or religious identity. Could you maybe say a bit about how that applies to Kashmir?
Yes, thank you, Meghan. This year marks 67 years of continued conflict in Kashmir. And I believe that in order for the conflict to be resolved, we have unfortunately been unable to establish the basic prerequisites. by which I mean that we have not been able to understand each other's context. You talked about the concept of humanizing the enemy, and I found that very, very interesting in my context too. Unfortunately, both the sides, India, Pakistan, and the people of Kashmir themselves have not been able to actually understand why the other does what it does. And if you're not able to empathize with the enemy, if you're not able to understand the background of where they're coming from, why they're doing what they're doing, you will not be able to reach the table of negotiation. So, adding to what Hakeem has already said, we believe that the conflict in Kashmir should end immediately. It is our appeal as Kashmiris to both India and Pakistan and to the international community to play whatever part that they can to pressurize the two nations if they have to begin the process of negotiation. And for that to happen, it is very important for us to realize and for us to understand that we need to sit down, we need to humanize the enemy, we need to understand where they're coming from. Unfortunately, right now, we're in very early stages. There's a lot of hatred among the two sides. And hopefully, inshallah, sometime in the future, we're able to resolve this through conflict, through a process of negotiation, hopefully.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Now I'm going to put someone on the spot who is not anticipating to speak, but I'm going to turn to Buba, who's from Mali. And another thing that we heard a lot yesterday is young people saying, these stories are very inspiring, but how do they apply to my country where there are extremist violent groups? And I want to ask Buba to say a little bit about how does this idea of dialogue and negotiation apply in a country where you've got this very violent conflict with an extremist group? With whom will you seek to speak with, to create these voices of dialogue and negotiation?
Thank you for the question, and thanks for putting me on the spot. So it has to be a long-term commitment. We have to really seek to go into the real root of the problem in terms of the needs of the people, not the position they're referring to. So when we have extremism, it comes from somewhere. It comes from people giving up or people losing the hope that they will be part of the future, or that there's a future for them. So we really have to engage everybody in that perspective. And then understanding that from our perspective, from our side, the real problem is that we will get over these issues, and we will get over the issue as it is now, because we've defeated conflicts before, we've defeated apathy before. But the one thing we did wrong and that we should never do again is to never, ever take peace for granted. Thank you.
It's an excellent message. And I'd like to turn to Noam, who made a very inspiring plea for leaders in her country to come forward with strategic proposals, to be role models. But I'd like to ask you, what about you being a role model? And what about you putting forward proposals that your leaders can maybe think and be forced to react to?
This is exactly my being and my existence. My individual choices and the kind of choices I've made in my life, and this is a really strong message that I want to convey to everyone. Your individual messages and what you send with your choices can affect the collective. My grandmother is a Holocaust survivor. This summer I visited Romania, where she survived a Nazi camp. And I was really lucky to be raised by two Jewish parents who decided that they're not, exactly like I said, they're not going to give in to the reality as it is. They raised me in a mixed Palestinian-Jewish community, and I was fully exposed to the Palestinian narrative as well as the Israeli narrative from a really young age. What I found out is that my grandmother is suffering. The suffering of the Jewish people actually puts the Jewish people in a unique position where we are the ones who need to know how to treat others and not to oppress others. You know, I know that in the last summit, Archbishop Desmond Tutu made a lot of strong statements, and for me, he's a huge role model also for what's happening in Palestine and Israel, because he's a very, very brave religious leader that supported a brave political process. And during this summer, as the bombs were dropping on Gaza and people turned blind to more than 2,000 people that were brutally killed in Gaza, and humanity was lost, Desmond Tutu wrote a letter to the Israeli people and told them that Israel is not fully free until the Palestinians are free. The liberation of Palestine is the liberation of Israel. I have to say something about Belfast as well. I've been many, many times to Belfast, and the walls in Belfast still exist. They still separate. People don't lose their identity, quite the opposite. If we find a way to truthfully reconcile the past, to keep your identity, not lose your identity, but find a way through acknowledging each other's past. Acknowledging Palestinian suffering actually makes my being more sustainable and more secure in the land which no one is leaving. Israelis and Palestinians are not going anywhere. Our fates are intertwined. Whether you like it or not, no one is going on anywhere. So we better find a way to live together. And we have to find a way, not, as you said, with the already convinced people. You have to find a way with those who haven't been exposed. And this is the work that I've been privileged to do with Interpeace in Israel, which very, very smartly and strategically helps us to target strategic spoilers, potential spoilers of peace, and transform them into peace builders. This is where my heart is.
I'm just been told we've been given more time because we haven't managed to get to everyone yet, but we're going to get to you all. You're all going to get a chance to talk, which is good, because this is exactly what we need to be talking about. This session is about you guys. But Martin has to leave us, and he has a very important short message that we're going to ask him to deliver before he goes. So he's under tight time constraints, so Martin, I'd like to invite you to the podium.
Aren't these all wonderful young people? Give them a big round of applause. I must say, I've enjoyed thoroughly the experience of the last 2 days, to meet all of you and to learn so much from you. And I hope that you will, in turn, take away from Dublin great experiences of the short few days that you've spent with us. The overwhelming message from the theme, peace and conflict resolution, is that we have to engage. We have to dialogue with, and we have to make peace with the perceived enemy. The people that we would least be expected to engage with. Those who are diametrically opposed to us in everything. In tradition, background, politics, religion, ambitions for the future. Eventually, we will do this, and it is our choice whether we take 2 days, 2 months, 2 years, 20 years, or even 200 years. At some point, we will sit across the table, tentatively at first, but then in friendship with our enemy. Difficult as it may be, we are challenged to acknowledge and accept that there is a value and a worth in the other, the enemy. It is there, although it might not be obvious. No one side has a monopoly on these things. There is goodness in every human heart. It may be deeply buried in the hardest of hearts, but it is there. And we need to find the time and the patience to reveal that goodness and to connect with it. How do we do this? Simply, we find ways to engage, build relationships, build friendships, then trust, and after trust, take the quantum step to generosity, to find the courage to be generous. It is out of the generous embrace of each other that solutions to seemingly intractable problems tumble. You may well say that trying this approach is a sign of weakness, but on the contrary, it is a sign of real strength, real confidence, and real leadership. You may also say it is naive or idealistic, but it is not, because we did it in Northern Ireland. The conflict in Northern Ireland was vicious, it was violent, it was dehumanizing. Unimaginable atrocities were committed. There was a real sense of hopelessness and despair. There was too much grief and too many tears. And despite all of this, we found a way to do things differently. We found an alternative to the old way of meeting violence with violence, hatred with hatred, contempt with contempt, atrocity with atrocity, and we found peace. If this was possible in Northern Ireland, it is possible anywhere. As you look up at me right now, you probably see an old, or if you're being kind, you'd say an older person. And you're right, because I'm on the downslope of life, you are all on the upslope. But I remember vividly a time when I was much younger than the youngest of you. During my early teenage years, I couldn't wait until I was 18. I couldn't wait to go to university, couldn't wait until I was 21, couldn't wait to get married and have children, couldn't wait until I got a new job, then a bigger job, then a better job. And suddenly, I'm 63 years of age. And I look back and I wonder, where did all those years go to? They have evaporated just like a puff of smoke. And there's a lesson in that, and the lesson is this. Live life fully in the present and make every single moment count. Whatever your station in life is, take pride in it, enjoy it, and grow in it. Don't wish or plan your life away. I am sure that you've heard older people say to you so many times, you are the leaders of tomorrow, you are the leaders of the future. And of course that is true, but you are the leaders of now, right this very minute. You do not need to have an accumulation of years or a certain number of experiences to qualify as a leader. Every single one of you is called to be a leader in your family, in your community, in your workplace, in your country, and on the world stage. You all have a role to play, some big and influential, some medium-sized, some small, but all are important as we try to craft better societies, more inclusive communities, stronger economies, and a peaceful world. You will bring the badly needed qualities of energy, enthusiasm, positivity, and freshness to the exercise of leadership. Get more informed about the issues facing our world. Create your own networks and use the tools of modern technology to have your collective voice heard. During your short time in our capital city, Dublin, you will make friendships that will endure and networks that will last. My advice to you is simply this. Question everything. Take nothing for granted. Never accept that the old ways are the only ways of doing things. Always challenge orthodoxy, challenge convention, challenge groupthink, challenge precedents, challenge protocols. Simply write your own. Your achievements will showcase your generation. You will shape our world and its future in your time and in your way. You will leave your special mark, your stamp, to the admiration of us all. Of that I am certain. In your hands, our world is in safe hands. Take good care of it. I know you will. Thank you.
Bear with me for 1 minute before you go. Delegates, Senator Martin McAleese, this amazing, quiet soul, who our friend President Bill Clinton... Our friend President Bill Clinton credits with being one of the prime movers of the peace process in Northern Ireland. I thank you, and he's leaving us to go and give our friend Professor Eunice his honorary doctorate. So please thank Martin McAleese.
Thank you all very much. Thank you. Let's see.
So with that in mind, we're going to come back to the delegates because you still have a lot of important messages here. So I'm going to let Meghan lead with the questions.
Excellent. We still have some people who haven't yet had a chance to share their reflections. And hopefully when they do so, they might recognize that some people in the audience are not from countries in conflict and that maybe there's a role for outsiders to play to help to be useful. I'm an American, and I was an American diplomat. I've lived in Sri Lanka, I've lived in Iraq, and I've worked on many of the countries from which these delegates come from in various ways. So these messages are for all of us, not just for people who are dealing with difficult conflicts. We're going to go to Georgise, who is going to talk to us a little bit about that these conflicts often have many dimensions. He himself is a Kurdish Christian, and if you'd say a little bit about your perspective.
Well, although I don't want to be identified as Christian, I am a Syrian, but Christian is what I believe in. But the war that we are facing today is against our belief. That's why I'm here to speak for the suffering of Christians who were forced to leave their home and because of what's so-called Islamic State. They were forced to leave the place where it gave birth to civilization, the place which was cradle of civilization 7,000 years ago. And now, unfortunately, it became the grave and shame of the civilization. The country where the indigenous people were forced to either convert to Islam, pay tax to live in their home, live or die. So our history and heritage was damaged and wiped out. As we are speaking now, 200,000 Christians are refugees living in Kurdistan, in tents, schools, churches, and public parks. They were able to survive because the weather was helpful, but now it's going to be cold. So a very urgent action is needed from the international communities to save this ancient people. And if the international community do not help Kurdistan, a disaster is going to happen, even in education, because we'll be having 2 generations without access to education. One of them, those who were forced to leave, and the other one, people of Kurdistan themselves, because their schools became home to displaced people. And they're living in Kurdistan now. Kurdistan is a region of 5 million people, and now we're having more than 1.5 million people displaced there. So it's so hard to host that amount of people. So from here, I'm asking for the whole international communities, NGOs, UN, to take a very urgent action without thinking twice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we'll turn to Pintu. If you could tell us a little bit about your country and specifically the issue of youth engagement.
Most of people may know me. Last year, I was on this floor talking about education. And I really like the word when we say we young people, but really we are not young people. because we have to take action now. When can you imagine your world in 10 years? What will be the war? What will be the sustainable war you want to live in? So just to imagine, stop talking about youth involvement, education, or maybe conflict, but imagine a world without peace. So we as young people, I think really, we need to stop thinking we are young. We are not young, because things are changing, so we have to go forward. And never forget everything you are going through now. Whatever you are doing, always you are making one step forward. So in my country, we face many challenges, and the strong one now is the conflict in the north, because most of terrorist people are kill people and even rape women. And many girls now are in the capital without education. And if a single person from this stage and this room can even give a single clothes choice, it can change someone's life. So we have to take action now. It's up to us. A single thing you can do it. Stop thinking we are not young. We are the future generation, it's true, but we are not longer young.
Thank you. Now we'll hear from Aline, who's from Bosnia.
Hello, guys. So I would like to pay attention on the structural violence. Like when you have a signed peace accord, then you live in divided society and you're surrounded by structural violence. I was in school that's called two schools under the one roof. So one floor is for one ethnic group and another floor is for another ethnic group. So I'm just wondering, can chemistry be ethnically defined, or art, or music, or these kind of things? I refuse to accept that. So please, guys, when we think about all these things, do not accept that one constitutional law, one paper describes your own identity, because the very first and the very last thing is you are firstly humans, and then you can be something else. And yeah, once again, open your eyes for the structural violence, because the structural violence leads us again to aggressive violence. And sometimes these signs of the structural violence are hidden. So again, open your eyes very, very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll hear from Nader, who is from Palestine, and he'll be talking about the issue of trust.
I'm not going to be a diplomatic. I'm going to go straight up to the point. Yesterday, when I talked to Jackie about that, Jackie said it with the lovely Northern Irish accent. He said, when there's no trust, it's just so hard. So, was that good, Jackie? Okay. The trust issue, I mean, in the Northern Irish issue, the trust was a big part. The thing is, when USA intervened in it, they held the parties accountable to their commitments. And when I want to apply that to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, the first thing I would remember is the settlements issue. When you talk about Oslo Agreement, one of the major points in Oslo agreements, when it gave us 22% of our land in Palestine, one of the commitments on Israel was to clear out all the settlements inside those 22% of Palestine. And they didn't. It actually got extended, and is still extending until now. Okay? And nobody's holding UN, USA, nobody's holding Israel accountable for those settlements, as an example. Okay? So I think somebody got to do something about that. If you, I know you guys are fed up with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. You've been hearing about it a lot, okay? But somebody needs to hold the parties accountable to their commitments to make that real change. Thank you very much.
Okay, very well done.
Thank you, Nader. Now we'll hear from Melina. If you could tell us a little bit about your country and the issue you'd like to draw to our attention.
Thank you, Professor. The only moment we have is the present moment, and the only people to trust is ourselves. It was beyond my control that my country disintegrated at the age of 4, or that my country was bombed at the age of 11 with depleted uranium. But what is now within my control is actually ability to organize events in my region. And I was so proud that we actually, with help with One Young World core team, managed to organize caucus event where 30 people arrived to my country and listened to wonderful workshops and started working on projects. And actually we had people from all countries, including 3 delegates from Albania. And it's not in the end about waving flags. It's about realizing what are our daily successes, writing them down, and what are our 5 things to be grateful for. I'm pleased to announce writing of a novel. Actually, in this book, I'm starting writing it by our role model Gandhi, which will talk about our One Young World journey and my region. Thank you.
I'd like to turn to Avan from Kurdistan to talk about seeing that people's voices are heard.
Thank you so much. I'm from Kurdistan, and currently we are facing many, many issues. And like most of my colleagues here, and probably the majority of the audience, I think that it is important to get to conflict resolution and in long term to peace through acceptance. Acceptance of differentiation between people. And the way to get there is through education. That's what most of us agreed on. And it's the things like these summits where we see different people and we take back our knowledge, we take back our experience that we learn here and show it to our own communities, but also to show others what we are facing, to make our voices heard, to show that those 1.5 million refugees, they're not alone, to make their voices heard, to let people know about them. And I think that's really important. Thank you.
Thank you. And so it's been a real inspiration to spend the last day and a half with this group. And what I'm most impressed with is that everyone up here on stage is not responsible for the making of the conflict in which they're living, but they are all taking responsibility for their future. And I'd like to end just with reiterating what Pintu said when she said, take action, do something. Don't sit back and blame people, blame the past, blame others. Look at everyone as a human first, a human before anything else, and think about what you can do, even if it's something very small. As Hakeem said, this could take a long time. And we know that the conflict in many of these places has gone on for decades, but that doesn't mean it can't change. And that's what the Northern Ireland experience and the experience of Sean and Jackie tells us, that there is scope for change even in places where things seem hopeless. I think we're going to end now by asking Jackie. I'll turn it over to Bob.
We're going to move to Meghan, closing with Jackie and Sean with a couple of comments. Before we do, we've one last comment that I've been asked to make from Buba. If you want to wrap up with one comment?
Sure.
Just to build up from what you said in terms of long-term and life commitment, this was a life-changing experience for me because when we came here, we were not ready. I was not planning to come and talk about peace and conflict. I was trying to be in a technology group or something. So when they asked me about what we were doing for peace in Mali, it turns out that we were doing something for peace in Mali already, but that was not my main focus because I felt like it was political. So when we got enrolled in this process, I was talking to Nushela from Sri Lanka on our way into the process, and we were looking at Jackie and Sean, and we came to the conclusion that this has to be a full commitment. It cannot be like one step in, one step out. You cannot be like, okay, I'm going to do it for the next 5 years and go to something. It has to be a lifelong commitment that with full dedication. And then I think Nushela will be, I hope you're not in trouble, but we made that commitment that we dedicate our lives to peace in our country, and we'll make sure that peace prevails in our country. One more. And To be a bit personal, we've had the Mali crisis really broke out in 2012, and I was living in South Africa. It's a bit far from everywhere, and I used to call it the end of the world. So the same year, I was diagnosed with a heart condition. I couldn't play sport anymore. It was the end of the world for me. But I had to make the decision for what I wanted to do the rest of my life, and I couldn't sit and watch the Malian people go through what we were going through, especially the young guys, because we were the real losers. We already had a bad system, we already had a bad education system, and then we already had unemployment issues, and now our friends were the ones being killed in the war, in all the forms. So it comes to a personal level where you have to decide on what to do, on how to do it, and how much you will do it. And the second thing that happened for me is 3 months ago, I became a father, and when I look at a child, I have no choice. And I think you have to make that choice to decide if you want, who you want it to do for. Find something, find somebody, but please do something for peace and do something for humanity. And that's a choice we all have to make. And there's no lies about it. Either you're in or you're out. So make a choice. That's it.
Thank you. And it's hard to sit up here on stage and to speak to such a large audience. But it's even harder to go home and do the kinds of things that you've spoken about doing here. So I ask you all to join me in thanking them and to ask them to remember the support that is in this room today, because they will experience some very difficult times. And they will experience moments where they really question whether they're making the right choices, whether they're investing in the right things. And I want them to remember this moment of all of us applauding them when they reach those moments, and think that we are supporting you and we're supporting your efforts and your vision, because you are our future. Thank you. Of this panel. So we've all listened to Jackie and to Sean and have drawn inspiration from them. But what many of you weren't able to hear yesterday is both of them acknowledge that while things in Northern Ireland are vastly better than they used to be, they're not perfect. That peace is not a perfect peace in Northern Ireland, and that there's still a journey, and it's actually still a daily journey. And so I want to ask them, the learning here has gone both ways. It's not just that they have helped you learn about what you need to do and the challenges you may face, but they're still at it. They're still actively engaged in building peace in Northern Ireland. So I want to give them both a chance to say what they have learned from interacting with all of these very inspiring people. Jackie, could I begin with you?
Could I just say that I remember as far back as 1973, that an American journalist asked me, when are you going to start speaking to the IRA? And as a one-word answer was never. You know, the IRA were trying to feed us, trying to kill us, and we were trying to do the same to them. There was only going to be one winner. There was no compromise, there was no middle ground. But as the years progressed, and we saw that it wasn't going anywhere, we had to personalize it. We had to think back. Originally, it was about our families came first, our community, our property, and then it became something else. It became a war. We got to a stage where we're back to it's our families, it's our community, it's our homes. We're trying to provide a better future. What we did in the middle was wrong. It wasn't going to solve anything, but we had to do it to find that out. You know, and when Sean and I came here, we weren't sure what to expect. The group I work for in Belfast is a group called Prison to Peace, where all the major recognised paramilitary organisations, ex-prisoners, come together, share our experiences. We talk to school teachers, we talk to school kids, we talk to youth leaders, we talk to people in youth clubs. And we tell the same story that we told to the guys yesterday. And it works. We deglamorise paramilitarism. We don't try to make ourselves out to be the superheroes or the great guys or the soldiers of the past. We tell it as it is and as it was. But when I talked with and listened to the guys here yesterday, you know, if you watch the news and you listen to the news, you think the world's going mad. You know, there is so much violence in this world, conflict, and well, we have had 20 years of some sort of a peace. To watch what is still going on is horrendous, and it's totally unfair. It's wrong. It's man's inhumanity to man. And until we can all sit down and speak to each other and speak with each other and listen to each other, unfortunately, those troubles, those conflicts are going to go on. I am humbled by what I heard yesterday. It was one thing seeing it on the news or hearing it on the news, but to listen to you and to meet you and to talk with you, it's been a fantastic experience for me, and I just wish I could do more for you.
Thank you, Jackie. Sean, would you like to share what you've learned from our young guests?
Well, likewise, Megan. Over this past couple of days, listening to the stories, the experiences, the perspectives of young people like yourselves has been inspirational and humbling for me as well. You are our future. And listening to you this morning, our future is in good hands. While every conflict has its own dynamics, there are certain commonalities: the pain, the suffering, the despair, the sense of hopelessness. And we have to replace that with optimism, with hope for the future. And it's a stark choice for people who live in conflict zones, especially for combatants. We can tolerate and indeed perpetuate the conflict and die together, or we can work together and live together and build a peace together. And I know what my priority is. I want to live together. So our future collectively is in your hands and other young people like yourselves. It's a heavy and terrible responsibility because we live in a very small world. I think you made the comment, everything is interrelated. We have to build peace together. We can't do it on our own. So let's go for it. Let's build that peace together because that's our future. And without that, we don't have a future.
Thanks a million, Sean, Jackie. That was fantastic. I'd just like to wrap up the session by thanking everyone. This has been an unbelievable 2 days. The content that these people have contributed, that you've contributed, has lent itself massively to the learnings and the lessons that have been brought out. There's been consensus reached, and a lot of people have benefited from this. In terms of our experience here in Ireland, a lot has been done, and there's a lot left to do. But I'm inspired around the world that it's a young generation of leaders who'll reach for the baton next, not least our 2 young delegates from Northern Ireland. I'm proud of what has been achieved here, and I'm thankful. I'm thankful for the commitment of people like Martin McAleese and Maura Grant the assistance of Meghan O'Sullivan, the perspectives of Philip and Tom, the historians you've seen yesterday. And I'm thankful that Sean and Jackie have shouted stop, so that our generation don't have to shout. We can talk. So One Young World, let's talk.
An amazing session, amazing, amazing session. Thank you all. Huge round of applause. That was unbelievable. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you. Thank you so much.
And you guys are amazing. Thank you so much.
Your legacy. Thank you, Megan. Thank you.